And hello everyone, it's me again. But don't worry because I've got someone far more experienced and informed on the call. So I do just want to send a couple of apologies. We had a few last minute technical and dropout issues. So we don't have everybody who we wanted on this panel, but that's okay because we do have the amazing Francis on the call. And for those who aren't familiar with Francis's work, just go on Twitter. You'll see a lot of it, and it's certainly provocative, insightful, interesting stuff. But I'm talking about her without actually enabling her to share with us her work as an esteemed economist. So actually, Francis, it would be great maybe if you're just able to share with everybody uh, who you are, what you do, and I suppose what your interest in the crypto world is.
Well, obviously, I'm Twitter queen, but apart from that, um, I have a background in banking and finance, and weirdly also in music and singing. But for the purposes of today, I'm going to be talking, not singing. Um, I've been involved in the crypto space and writing and speaking about Bitcoin, and then Natalie more also about Ethereum and other things as well. Since about 2011, 2012, watched it grow and develop through all the various developments, booms and busts and wars and disagreements and some of the very exciting things that have happened in the space. I'm known a bit as a skeptic, but I guess my view is still fairly nuanced, and I still think there's something exciting going on in the space. The problem is trying to decide what it is.
No, well, there we go. I mean, yes. So in the ecosystem, I mean, some people are called very bullish, and some people be called very bearish. And I think it's fair to say you'd be considered by some on the more bearish side, which I think is
Mm.
really interesting. But actually, maybe that's my first point. Obviously, you've seen the development of the crypto world over the last kind of almost 10 years. You mentioned now, if for many people who are watching this, they have also seen that, and some might look back on that time as the time that they became millionaires. They may look at this as the time when they've become incredibly successful and happy, having spotted something and joined on that bandwagon. So from your perspective, why are you considered, I suppose, a skeptic on it? What is it about it that gives you that degree of caution, I suppose?
I suppose because I've always seen myself as an observer rather than a participant. So although in order to understand this space, you do have to dabble in it a bit, and I do dabble in it a bit just to understand how it works. I'm not a major investor, and that's a deliberate choice. And so I'm always accused of being bitter and salty because I've missed out on this wonderful opportunity. And yes, it's a fair criticism. But I think having been involved in it from the start, having seen what it grew out of, the financial crisis, the dreadful mess that banks managed to make of our financial system and indeed of our economies, I've reached the point now of being actually quite disappointed, I think, in the way it's developed over this time, because it was meant to be something that replaced the banks. And now instead of replacing the banks, it's tying itself to the banks and it's creating new banks. And that doesn't seem quite right to me. But nonetheless, I remain hopeful that we'll resolve this somehow and end up with something which is, in the end, better than the old system. I hope. I'd like it to, and maybe I can be part of trying to make it better.
So on that, I think if I think about my understanding of the evolution of it, obviously, if we talk about I suppose decentralized systems and the blockchain as kind of almost a starting point, and crypto being a use case on that. The idea of a decentralized system is to give power to the people. This
Mm-hmm.
anti-establishment movement almost. It's far more accessible, far more transparent, far more democratized, and therefore that should be a better thing. And obviously, if you take it from a consumer's perspective, lots more people have been able to get involved in the ecosystem before. Lots of people have started to be able to trade new types of assets, new types of instruments, and actually maybe I've even learned just about the old traditional ones because they've been exposed to some of these new ones. some folks might say, well, that was the whole idea of it. And actually, these other things that have spun out are kind of just the unfortunate consequences of that utopian vision about, you know, far more transparency and accessibility, in the same way that a financial crisis is just an unfortunate, you know, consequence of, you know, a capitalist banking system or whatever it might be. You know, where do you kind of reconcile with actually maybe these are just unfortunate circumstances in terms of, you know, proximity to centralization, where actually like the move itself is operating exactly as it was meant to?
I think it's pretty plain that the crypto system as it is now is not operating the way that Satoshi originally envisaged it. It's very, very different from what he originally proposed. That's not to say it's wrong to have developed in that way, just to say it's developed in a different way. And in many cases, for good reasons. It's lost some people along the way. It's gained other people. There are a few things that disturb me about it. The first is that it does seem to me that an awful lot of people joining the space now are only primarily in it to enrich themselves. And that kind of loses a bit of the utopian vision, the hope to make the world, society, a better place. If you're only in it to enrich yourself, then how are you making society a better place? That disturbs me. But on the other side, I can see that it is giving a wider range of people direct access to ways of managing their own money that weren't available to them before, and cutting out middlemen who are dishonest. It is doing that. That said, it's also spawning a fair few fraudsters and scammers of its own. You might say, well, that's inevitable in a new system, and I might agree with you. But the reason we've had so much regulation in the existing system is because money does tend to attract fraudsters and scammers. And it's hard not to conclude that all the people who have been evicted from the existing system have ended up in the crypto system because it's not so heavily regulated. So the way we seem to be going now is down the route of, well, crypto's here to stay. Crypto has an important role to play in the emergent new financial system, whatever it's going to look like. But we need to regulate it. And actually, kind of the honest actors in the space, I think, broadly agree with that.
So if we talk about that regulation point, you know, and there's multiple ways it manifests itself. Let's take, you know, Honduras, who were kind of saying, well, actually, we're going to make it a government thing. I heard, you know, rumors of Bitcoin coming out, you know, all of these things. You know, if the system has that regulation, that proximity to lawmakers in order to stop some of those deviant or bad actors, then it's no different really from what we have today. And isn't the point of it to be different, to be potentially less regulated, to like maybe it should be a Wild West? I mean, you know, isn't that the free market in its freest self, maybe? And maybe that's where it should be going. I mean, how do you reflect on that argument, which is like the whole point is to stay away from these people, and therefore, you know, criminals exist whether there's regulation or not, you know, bad actors exist whether there's rules to abide by or not. And actually the whole point of this is that, you know, it's almost a self-policing, self-government, you know, self-governing, transparent system, and actually pushes for further regulation, defeat the whole point.
Yeah, I mean, that's a powerful argument. I'm actually kind of not such an extreme libertarian that I think that the free markets are completely self-regulating, and there's never any need for rules and regulations and safe spaces and protection of the innocent, and protection of the people who have less information and less power.
Markets are placed. Vision, that, isn't it?
It's a very utopian vision, and I think it's not actually very realistic. You know, I mean, actually, a completely unregulated market is the law of the jungle. No, I'm bigger than you, therefore I can take your stuff, isn't it? And I'm not sure that's how a civilized society kind of ought to be operating. Really, my view is that we actually do need some regulation, because in the end, and I think this is kind of fundamental to what I'm talking about, in the end, crypto is not really about tech, it's about people. And we may change the tech in many ways. When we invent new ways of doing things, we may find ways of making things more transparent or whatever. Then you're still dealing with people, and people are both good and bad. And sometimes weaker and less powerful and less knowledgeable people need protecting from the bad guys who know a lot and are powerful. And I don't think that crypto changes that. And so the problem is always how you ensure that your regulators aren't among the bad guys, and that's a challenge in itself. And I'm not sure that crypto quite solves that one either.
Yeah, no, well, I suppose, so if we take the opposite and we don't say the free of the market, the free of the people, and kind of go into this very libertarian type of point of view, I'll take a question kind of from the chat right now. We've got one which is, we've seen the traditional institutions, the banks, so to speak, start to clamp down on competition, actually, whether it's like banning, crypto transactions, from accounts that they service in whatever way, depending on what financial instrument they are. We've seen some countries start to clamp down on that. And, therefore, actually, we're seeing almost the worst of what happens in a regulated market in some instances. The big stay big, and actually anything that looks to disrupt them, gets caught up in this regulatory red tape, and especially in the financial services industry, that can be quite crippling and stifling to actually any well-meaning or positive innovation that can go on. I mean, where do you think we can find that balance, and how do you think we can do that? Or actually, is that the point? Like, the big should stay big. We have banks for a reason. They're not that broken, and actually, innovation's great, and if it's good, it will survive. And if it's not, because it's got ill harms like damage to the environment or criminality, then actually the whole point is that we don't let these things succeed.
Well, I mean, there's a lot to unpick there. I wrote recently that I think part of it's the tragedy of crypto, really, that it seems destined to replicate the thing it was trying to eliminate. And I do find that a tragedy. I find it very sad. I would like it not to be like that. That said, I do think that whatever is emerging now, crypto will be at the heart of it. I mean, it's a horrible thing to say, but crypto is actually being absorbed into the financial system. But it's one of these situations where it absorbed into it, and in so doing transforms it. So I think we will see the end of banks as we know them now. I think they'll morph into something else, and that's already happening, actually. But I suspect that it's a bit like there's a company called IBM that used to make business machines and ended up being a computer company, and it's existed for a long time, and it's transformed itself into other things, but it still exists. And I think we'll see that with banks, that they will transform themselves. And so, in a way, refusing to engage with cryptocurrencies as they were is, in a way, a prelude to banks actually getting involved in the space themselves. They're already getting involved as custodians of cryptocurrency digital assets. They've experimented with issuing their own stable coins. I think we're going to see banks actually getting involved in the crypto space, not issuing permissionless cryptocurrencies, because why would they? But certainly doing permissioned ones, potentially for trade finance, and stable coins, and I said, providing services to the crypto marketplace. Now, that may not have been what we envisaged, but it is very different from what we're used to banks doing. Whether they'll change their ways as part of that, I'm not so sure. And so I think they're probably going to need to carry on being regulated. And I'm not sure we would want to stop regulating banks that were involving themselves in the crypto space, would we?
No, and I think then there's a question if we move to the third axis. So if we've spoken about those who are kind of proponents of crypto, and those are proponents of the existing system. I mean, there's two things that will come onto that. In an ideal world, in the sense that if that utopian libertarian vision isn't ideal, and if this kind of fixated kind of the everyday system that we have today isn't exactly ideal either, the idea that we could probably find something better where there's some sort of regulation is desirable, but probably only desirable until you realize who our regulators are. It's the fact of understanding the crypto world, understanding innovation, understanding technology. I don't think is something that anybody would say that the legislators are on or at the cutting edge of. So given that they also are fallible and imperfect actors in this ecosystem, should they be the ones to slow down banks or slow down innovation? Are they actually the problem and the glue, and actually, to some people's thoughts that ultimately this will work itself out. You know, things will happen and regulators will catch up, and that's kind of the way that all innovations happened. We built cars and then we realized we needed seatbelts. We built the internet and then we decided, oh, maybe we should actually regulate and create some sort of crimes for abuse on the internet. We'll build crypto and then we'll work out what the problem is and solve it that way. And actually that's how it should be, because regulators themselves aren't the best people to come up with these solutions.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you about that, actually. I've been a bit disturbed recently by moves in America, for example, to try and shoehorn crypto into existing regulatory structures. So, well, this looks like a bank, so it's got to be a bank. Well, no, it might do bank-like things, but that doesn't mean you want to regulate it like existing banks. It's not the same beast. And there's a strong case, I think, for the regulatory infrastructure that we place around crypto to protect the innocent, as I said, actually being specific to crypto and involving people who understand crypto. I think it's fairly plain to me that a good many of the regulators we've got at the moment actually don't understand crypto very well. And that lack of understanding is, perhaps a bigger problem even than the possibility that it might actually be maliciously trying to kill off crypto or alternatively profit from it via the back door.
Well, exactly, and I think we can probably draw some parallels across that in the sense of, take social media and what we're seeing, in the talks about breaking up big tech and all of that. And actually, you can't avoid the politicians from the politics and the platforms, and that can be a challenge. So if I come back to crypto, as I was having a conversation with Jamie Rogozinski, who set up the Wall Street Bets subreddit, which has obviously been incredibly instrumental at influencing markets in its own unique way. In conversation with him, and for those who want to watch that Black Tech Fest, check out the session. It's later today. There is this kind of egalitarian idea behind that as well, which is kind of like almost a middle finger up to the existing power structures. People on that subreddit, they invest in Dogecoin because it's funny, because they can have a laugh, because it's their money, and who's to tell anybody what to do with their own money in that kind of very, it's mine, I can do what I want. Or if you're Elon Musk or, whoever it be who wants to tweet about, something going to the moon, well, do you know what I mean? I'm allowed to say what I want and what I do. And actually people see, hope in crypto as kind of a big, anti-establishment or middle finger up to the existing power hierarchies of the world. They see this as a almost Web 4.0 in the sense of this is my route to economic prosperity, and the people who want to regulate this and slow me down are just trying to take money from me, or they just don't want me to have a laugh, or I'm free to do this. And therefore crypto to them represents this kind of reorganization of global power. If everything's decentralized, then why do we need countries? Why do we need banks? And I think probably in all of our our education systems, we probably never really ask those deep questions unless you're doing some sort of philosophy major. So if I come kind of out of that and say, crypto actually represents, not only hope to a lot of people, but also a genuine threat to the power structures of the world, is that a problem? Why revolutions happen? Maybe this is just the modern day way of lifting up your arms and fighting for your right. I mean, this is how some people believe on it. How do you view it on that lens?
I mean, crypto is in many respects very much a young person's game. I'm unusual in the space of being quite old, and I get laughed at because of it. I know what I am, and it's absolutely right and normal and reasonable for young people to have this sense of utopianism and wanting to change the world for the better. And crypto is very much part of that, which is why I personally actually do feel a bit disappointed in a way that it hasn't. And I'm saying it replicating the existing system rather than changing the world for the better. And I'm old. I would want young people to be interested, to want to change the world, to want to actually turn this thing into a revolution that upends the power structures. I mean, more power to them. That's how it should be. Whether it would succeed is another matter. There's a lot of forces in this world now, and they're not just crypto. There's a lot of different pressures. There's also quite a retro pressure as well. Demographics are against us. We've got the whole climate change thing, and crypto is a bit shaky on that, to be honest. So whether they'll succeed in upending the power structures and creating a kind of a global crypto paradise, I actually rather doubt. But absolutely, they've got to try. I think it's right that young people should try and change the world to reinvent it in their own image. And there are two things I think they've actually succeeded in already, and I think this is brilliant. The first is that after the financial crisis, we made a big mistake as a world, and that is that we we kind of shored up the existing financial system, and we did so by extracting a lot of money, particularly from young people. And what young people have done is done an absolutely massive middle finger to that, and said, up yours, we are going to create our own money. And you've succeeded in doing that. Now, I know Bitcoiners are saying, well, the only true money here is Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is very, very restricted in how much it in how much there is and so forth. But you look at the crypto space as a whole, there's huge amounts of money in it. It's all tied to the dollar because you need it to feel real. But really, it's new money that you've created for yourselves, and I think that's brilliant. And along with that has gone kind of a restructuring of power structures. As you say, a sense of fun, a sense of anti-establishment and kind of kicking against the existing structures. And again, I think that's brilliant too, because these structures need to be challenged. They may not ever be upended or disappear, but they do need to be reformed, and they won't reform themselves from within. So the fact that they're being challenged by crypto is, I think, a very good thing.
Amazing. Oh, I think we might even be coming to consensus, but I'm going to just approach the elephant in the room, though. And we've only got a few more minutes, so do bear that in mind. But this climate change, that's the other immovable force in what seems to be happening. And we've seen Tesla take a step back from crypto, citing climate. We obviously see China having massive withdrawal. No one can mine. Look at what it's doing to the planet. How do those reconcile? Actually, will the nail in the coffin for crypto, if there is one, be its impact on the environment? Do you think that's the way that ultimately, it's a never situation?
There are two ways this could play out. I mean, we could have an absolute revolution in green energy. We could have solar satellite energy, which is free and cheap and abundant, and everybody could use it, in which case we've solved our mining problem, right? Or we can say, well, okay, that was a bit of a mistake. We need to find an alternative. And that, in a way, brings me back to the heart of crypto, where I think, having been very positive about it a minute ago, I'm going to be a bit negative now and say I think that the kind of the maxi crypto attitude is founded on a mistake. And the mistake is this idea that you can have money that is not a system of money in which there's no trust. Since time immemorial, systems of money have always been founded upon claims and obligations. They depend completely on people trusting each other. The representation of money, whatever it is simply a representation of the claim, the obligation. Now, for a claim or obligation to be honored, you have to have trust. In Bitcoin particularly, you try to replace that trust with kind of independent community verification based upon proof of work, based upon excessive energy use, to replace your trust. And the moment you try and step away from that, that's kind of very, very expensive way of validating your transactions. You end up with some form of trust. And I think we've seen that play out within crypto, that we've got trust coming back in various ways, because actually it's proving quite expensive and really quite difficult to run a system on no trust. In a way, it's a bit of a compromise. we may end up with a different set of intermediaries that we trust. We may end up with less trust in some areas and more trust in others. We may trust different people. But I think that the original crypto quest, the kind of almost traumatized crypto quest to eliminate trust in monetary transactions, I think is a mistake. And I think it will play out that we will end up having to compromise on that.
So we're running over, and I've got two
sorry.
things. One, we will continue this on Twitter because there's a question based exactly on what you just said, which is, but is the trust in the system, and do we need to trust people? So let's continue that conversation on another lens because we're running out of time. But my final question, because I will get kicked off soon by the production team, so let's keep it super short and snappy. But for the question of this panel, we started off with it was meant to be crypto now or never. Like, is now the time that we should be bullish about it, or is now the time to be bearish on it? Francis, what's your opinion? Crypto, is it now or never?
The economist's answer is it depends. I think that we are entering a period of crypto war, in which crypto is having to either fight the financial system or be absorbed into it. If your view is that crypto is to take over the financial system, then you can be bullish about it. But if your view is that crypto is to replace it without being absorbed into it, then I think you need to be bearish. In other words, I think that the absorbers are going to win.
Got it. Well, on that note, if you've got any other thoughts to that, you can. Francis, where can we find you?
I can be found on Twitter at all hours of the day or night, practically, at Francis_Coppola.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate this. I've already got more questions that we've literally just run out of time on. So I do have to say a massive thank you for joining and really, your flexibility in making this happen. We do appreciate that. Everyone do go and, engage in that conversation. As I said, Francis is having it. Yeah, I do want to make sure that that's all known. And yeah, as I said, I'll be posting that question pretty shortly later tonight. And we can pick up on, is the trust in the platform? And I think that's a fundamental one which we didn't get to cover, but hopefully leaves everyone with something to take away. So without further ado, thank you. Enjoy the rest of Black Tech Fest today. Thank you so much, Francis, and I'll hand back over to the team for the next session. Cheers.